I appreciate everybody coming back and watching this. Like I've said before, I've said it once or twice, and I'll say it again, 6 people can't be wrong. So I want to thank those people and anybody else watching this. And I want to introduce, I could call him my next guest, but really this is all just about conversation. And to me, he's more than a guest. I'm fortunate enough, I think, to call him a friend. And we go way back. This is a guy that taught me a lot, whether he knows it or whether he knows it or not, taught me a lot about what I had to do to be good. And all I had to do was listen to him and watch him and listen to him talk and watch his attitude. And I knew what a real musician then looked like. And so I wanted to introduce you guys to Brent Saklofske. Brent, how the hell are you doing?
Good, Gavin. You talking to me?
I'm talking to you. You talking to me?
Well, that was flattering. Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing well.
Good.
All is great. Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
And I, as flattering as it is, it's the absolute truth. I think, anyway. Personally, I remember the first time, and I knew your name, right? I knew the name Brent Saklofske back in 89, 90.
Sure.
And I knew, that represented something. And then I met you. And then I was just nervous for the next 20 years. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, well, my pleasure.
Well, you did. You had a huge impact on me as someone who wanted to be a thinking musician. And it's guys like you that made me realize that I needed to be serious about something. That in my life I needed to take something seriously. And so I have, and once again, it's all your fault. And of course, I mean that in jest. So, you and I have been talking about a lot of things just off camera, and I want to get into it. I guess for me, I've gotten, it seems like the greatest place to start, or the best or the easiest place to start. But I would like to know a little bit about where you come from, because as much as you and I have worked together, we've never really sat down and kind of, I don't know what made Brent Saklofske Brent Saklofske. I just know that you've always played and you've always been good. So maybe you can just take me through what that was. Where you were born, your dad, I know he was a musician. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was born here in Calgary.
Right.
Yeah, one of the few, and I don't know. My dad was a musician. Part-time, he was an oil patch guy and executive in the oil patch and whatnot, but he had a big band, and we were always around that stuff, and I think it's the era that I grew up in. I know reading about interviews with Schofield, or about their Schofield, for example, Pat Metheny, sort of my vintage, people like that, and what kind of turned their crank when they were younger, what got them going, what got their juices flowing. And it's typically the Beatles, that whole 60s thing. 60s was, it's a pop music thing, but there's a renaissance going on there with songwriting and new sounds and stuff like that. And then we kind of, myself and I think a lot of guys my vintage, we kind of segued into, especially through my dad, listening to, Miles Davis and Wes Montgomery and Chet Baker, and all kinds of alternative musics, other than pop, Guitar, for me, there's the turn-ons like Jimi Hendrix. And once again, you talk to anybody my vintage, and they could be the heaviest jazz shredders on the planet, or they could be still rock guys, or they could be whatever, or they could be classical guys, but that stuff was there, that new sort of sound, Clapton in his earlier years, with Cream and Blind Faith. There's guys like Randy California, these are guitar guys now, getting off the path a bit, but that stuff just turned me on so much. And then rock into the 70s, like Brian May, but I was still listening to the jazz guys, and I got into classical in a big way. And So for me, I like all classical music, but I got into Bach. and that's how
That's okay, right?
That's okay, man. I'll tell you, that's amazing stuff. That's how I start my day. Every day I play Bach.
Really?
A cup of coffee and I play Bach.
Huh.
And then I play other stuff too. But anyways, that's where I started. And we had the opportunity when we were younger too. Like my first gig, I was 15. 1968.
Right, you were telling me that.
Yeah, and we had this little band, and we were doing the new stuff though. We were doing the Hendrix and the Doors and things like that. That had maybe a longer sort of instrumental jam sessions, and we played a gig with another band that were doing more like the older stuff that those guys were doing back then, probably Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels and things like that, which was great stuff. But we played this stuff, and from that day on, I've just been a gigger. I've played.
Now at 15 though, would playing Hendrix be somewhat heady for a 15-year-old? Because it was that music at that time.
Yeah.
So nobody had heard Hendrix. Nobody had heard that kind of playing before. So was it hard to get your head around at 15 or?
I had to sort it out because I took lessons. My first guitar teacher was I went into, it was a guy named Jack Taylor, so anybody that's older, like Al Muirhead, you'd probably recognize that name. Jack Taylor, you go to take a lesson, and the lesson that was going on before was a tap dancing lesson. He was a vaudevillian. He taught tap dancing, he taught banjo and tenor banjo, like chord solos, and he taught guitar, and so I'm not learning Hendrix off of this guy,
Right.
So and then my next teacher he was a U of A grad, and it was the school of Mel Bay. What do you want to learn? I want to learn some finger picking, so he'd get the Mel Bay finger picking book, or the Mel Bay jazz standards book, or something like that. I had to sort that out all myself. So for example, when I teach now, I show people things, and I'm showing them the guitar neck, and then there's a point where I go, I'm going to stop there because you have to discover some of this stuff yourself. I know I did.
Right.
I discovered, that's a pentatonic scale. That's what all this and bending and all. I had to figure it out myself.
And that sort of separates the men from the boys anyway, right? If you take a guy a certain way and then you go, now you've got some work to do on your own. And you can kind of gauge and see if that guy's actually.
And you want it bad enough. I wanted to play like that, so I had to sort out the concepts and the techniques and all that.
When did you start playing guitar?
I started when I was in grade 5, so I don't know, would that be 9, 10 years old? Yeah, I had a blue guitar that was from my grandmother's house. I didn't have any lessons. I'd played piano, and it was a blue guitar with palm trees on it.
Nice.
So I tuned it to an open chord, and I played the grade 5 concert. We did The Lonely Bull by Herb Alpert, and I just bar chorded it,
How did you figure that out?
Well, ear. I think I've always had a naturally good ear, and ear's gotten me a long ways on my musical course, but I tuned it to, I'm not sure if it was major, probably would have had a major third in it, but if I was coming to a minor chord, which that particular tune is in a minor key, I would have just avoided the major third, so I would have played around it. Okay. And from there, then I started taking lessons, so traditional tuning, but I just kept learning. So for example, I started playing classical, and I later on I got serious, and Jake Solomons, who was the university guy, I took with him for a few years. But there was, for example, Richie Blackmore. You know this name? Deep Purple?
Richie Blackmore.
So he's an amazing technician. I went, how does he play that stuff? And he played really outside too. If you listen to some of his pretty,
Wasn't there something really unique about him? Well, wasn't it his tuning or something like that? Or?
No. It was his technique and just his. He played some really quirky things. But I read a thing about him when I was a real young guy, and I wonder, how does he play so accurately and so technically abled? And he used to get violin studies. And if you look at a violin study, it's all it's just a barrage. There's more black on the page than white, so it's like all 16th notes, and it just goes and goes and goes and goes, right?
Right.
And so
I'm guessing here, I'm assuming that because the strings are closer together, once you get to a fretboard of guitar, if you learn on something that tight, you have a little bit more room. That's going to just make you better because you don't have as much room, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, technically and then musically, you know, there's a lot of stuff that I just learned on my own. I would get guitar player. We didn't have teachers around here. We didn't have Mount Royal jazz colleges and Grant McEwen's and stuff like that.
Not at that time?
No. Excuse me, I gotta edit that out. But when I went to university circa 71, and I didn't finish a degree, but music was my minor. And so I'm in Music 201, and the teacher says, the professor says, you know, what's your instrument? I said, guitar. And he said, well, you need a teacher. There was no guys, and it was a classical program. So I took music as a minor, but that was a real learning curve for me. I had two professors in particular, Dr. Lee Zelson and Dr. Quentin Doolittle. And they were more appreciation listening classes and understanding form and periods and composers and the evolution of music, you know, which, I mean, I knew about pop music and then I'd listened to Bach, but that whole evolution, that, you know, 500-600 years of music.
Well, now it kind of makes sense to me too, because, you know, I played on numerous of your records now, and I always wondered what was the inspiration for that stuff? Like, why were you so, what's the word, moth to a flame to that kind of writing? And I couldn't really figure it out because I didn't know your history. So now it just makes more sense.
Yeah. I you know, I think in some terms, for me, I'm not a jazz player. I play jazz, but I'm not just this, you know, because I love it all so much. So like, you know, steel string finger picking style to Earl Klugh sort of nylon style, you know, jazz to finger, you know, the finger thing, the technique for anybody classical is so huge, right? In jazz colleges, I think there's some of that teaching, but it's more about the musicality, the modes, the harmony, scale combinations, and those kinds of things. So I've been very strictly sort of like intense on being a really good technical player, and that's where the classical discipline comes in. But it really has gotten me through all kinds of, you know, different genres, and then, you know, you listen to my stuff and it's just a hybrid of everything, you know. I mean, you can pick a world sort of style, Indian to Celtic to Baroque to Mahler to, you know, there's dissonances in there and there's traditionals in there.
But those would have been all your influences, right? I mean,
you bet,
would have been growing up, that's what you would listen to. And another thing that always impressed me about you, and I'm sure still does, although we haven't played together in a while, but your tone was always perfect for whatever you were playing. So if we were doing a country gig, there was the tone. If it was a rock gig, it was like, yeah, that's a rock tone. That's a perfect rock tone. There's so much energy coming out of that. You just, you know, you've always, to me, been I mean, of course, technical and everything else, but a tone guy as well.
Yeah, I just find it. I find that's your bottom line. You got to start with good tone, good sound, and then you can play. You know, I mean, I've played with not so good tone. I mean, sometimes when you're doing like a thing where you're just using a back line of gear and there's like, I won't name the brand, but there's a brand of amplifier that starts with a P.
Okay.
and a lot of times back in, you know, like going back to the 80s and stuff like that, that would be the amplifier that would be for the guitar guy. And I just
wasn't happening.
No, you know, and every note I'd be adjusting something on my guitar, going back to the amp in the middle of a song, and tone is so huge. I mean,
were pedals as big a thing back in the 70s as they?
Well, yeah. You know, like echoplexes, like you know, analog.
But even
you know.
those things didn't help that kind of.
No, nothing would help certain amplifiers. And you know, and everybody has their sound. You know, I found this like some time ago, like for guitar players, I can play on somebody else's rig and it sounds more like me than it does to them. There's something about, there's tone that comes out of your hands. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't explain it, but it does, you know.
Right.
But then you gravitate to gear that you like. I mean, I have certain amps and stuff on the floor and guitars that I prefer, and other people have other things that I just can't get sound out of. But there's certain players that could have a combination of amp, guitar, and whatever else, and they just get this glorious sound. And I play and I go, no. But then I go to my stuff and, you know.
Right. I think one of the ways that was evidence to me was, who's the guitar player for Yes? What's his name?
Oh, Steve Howe.
Steve Howe.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can maybe debate me on this. All I can tell you is my experience. I bought this live DVD. They were playing with some orchestra or something, and I've never heard a shittier tone in my life. And I was blown away because, like, on record, you know, Fragile and all that stuff is just amazing. But live, it was like he just took like a $30 amp out of a box, set it up with, you know, an under $100 guitar, and played. I was blown away at how bad his tone was.
I suspect with him, it was probably better live than however they did mic placements and stuff like that, because I've seen him live. But for example, you can go back and listen to some old Led Zeppelin live stuff, and it's horrendous tone, and it's like that. It's just you know. I mean, I know they're Marshalls, and he's got a Les Paul, but
sounds like plug and play.
Yeah, and then Jimmy Page is playing kind of sloppy at times. And then there's other times, I mean, so be it, but listen to the solo to Stairway to Heaven. I'm sorry, but I still love that song, and that solo is just so standard. It's like learning, you know, if you're into trumpet and you're going to learn, you know, a couple of Miles Davis solos that are sort of like the holy grails.
Sure.
That live recording and the tone is amazing, you know. So, you know, I don't know.
So I think you're apologizing for Stairway to Heaven. I think you're apologizing for the corporatism that made that song played as many times as it was, so that people got so sick of it. It's an amazing tune.
It's amazing.
If you were the first time you ever heard that song, or anybody did, nobody was apologizing for anything.
Well,
it was just an amazing song.
I played that song, for example. Here's a bit of Brent Saklofske history. I played that song it would have been 1974, and it wasn't a big deal then. I think the album was, you know, I don't know if it had come out a year or two before, but it wasn't a big deal yet. And I played that song. We did a warm-up gig for Kiss, their first tour.
No shit.
Yeah, their first tour in Canada. And we played that song.
Here in town?
Yeah.
Where?
Actually, it was at SAIT, at the student.
Kiss played at SAIT.
Yeah. They had the full meal deal, like, you know, the flames and the kit and the big sign and the boots, and, you know, and I hung with Ace, you know.
Did you?
Yeah, we were, you know.
Like that?
And, you know, actually, he said to me, you know, what you guys we did some Zepp covers and stuff like that, and I think we did a few originals and whatever else, but he said, what you guys did at that show tonight, I was doing that like a half a year ago. We were playing clubs. We were playing that stuff in clubs.
Really?
But we had some tunes, you know, and then all of a sudden they got a promoter, and, you know, they got the shtick and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. What were they like as players? Do you remember? Were they all right? Because I know their first live album, like Kiss Alive or whatever it was, they had to go in and re-record a shitload of that stuff. Yeah,
it was pretty square and rocky, you know. I mean, you know, from what I remember, it was okay. I mean, Ace Frehley, he was a rock player, you know. He was a pentatonic guy, but you know, Les Pauls and Marshalls, you know, and some stomp boxes, but he was a good guy, you know, and you know, we had a lot of commonalities, but you know, there's holy grails of, like, you know, Sunshine of Your Love. I mean, how many times have guitar teachers taught that to their kids? Listen to Clapton's tone and his phrasing on the solo. It's a beautiful solo. You know, Wheels of Fire, like that album, Clapton kind of went off the rails when he had some drug issues, obviously, and I think, you know, heaven forbid, I do use Stratocasters, but when he started using a Stratocaster through, I think, probably just a Fender amp, and I think it was just that plug and play thing. I don't know what happened, but when he was using Gibsons and Marshalls, you know, this is a guitar tone thing, but, you know, and then you listen to his phrasing back then, it was beautiful. But he's, you know, but there's certain things like that, you know, that I listen to, like the tone, and tone for me is, gotta have it, you know. Gotta have it. It's just beautiful.
Well, for as long as I've known you, for as long as I've worked with you, you've always had it. That was just something else, where you have to step up your game, from a drummer's perspective, from the drum chair. If I hear a tone like that, then I know that I can't step on that.
Yeah.
That I have to somehow I have to play within that tone.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably what helped me learn how to play to a room. Have ears
Yeah.
to be able to play within, a guitar player's tone and the sort of frequency levels. And do I play more hi-hat or less hi-hat? Do I open a hi-hat? Do I keep it closed?
Yeah.
All those things meant something when I was, when we were playing together.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where sometimes it just doesn't matter. But, it taught me so much about the instrument that I was playing just by having to fit within that tone. And then if you get a whole band of guys like that, like Neil Bentley, and guys that care about time and tone and everything else, then, it's just the whole thing is one big accountability fest.
Neil and another guy is Phil Hall.
Phil Hall, yeah.
I mean,
Phil did a couple of your records, right?
Yeah, he played quite a bit on this last one, actually.
Did he play on this?
Yeah.
I'm going to hold this up.
He played, I think he played one or two tunes. Actually, who's on it? Kai Pezzenti's has about 4 tunes on there.
Does he really?
Yeah. And
Really?
I played bass on a couple.
Did you really? Who played bass on 71?
I did.
No shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a friend of mine that I wanted to, and he just couldn't make it, and I just went, I need a bass track, man. So, yeah. And
Was that the friend from overseas? Was
no,
it that guy?
it's my friend Jim Irwin in town here.
Okay.
He's the guy, actually, he played the Kiss gig.
Oh, did you? Holy shit. So you guys go
Yeah,
way
we
back.
would go way back, yeah.
Right.
Way back machine.
Well, here, I'm going to hold this up. I know this is the only one
Yeah,
that you
for sure.
brought, but
Yeah.
and I'm hoping people bring more. But anyway, I don't know if you can see that. That's Brent Saklofske's latest record entitled Evermore?
It's entitled 4.
Entitled 4. Oh.
Because it's...
Evermore is a tune on there, though, right?
It is.
Yeah.
I've got 4 records, right? So, so you go, the first one's called Bob, next one's called John, third one's called like Charlie. Then you got 4, and it puts everything in perspective. Okay. He's got 4. So there's 3 more before that if they like that,
then they'll go back.
And get the other 3.
Grab the other stuff.
Get the box set.
I wondered if 4 wasn't alluding to 4 Sticks,
No.
which is, the Zeppelin.
Which is what that's actually taken off.
Right, 1971 is a take on 4 Sticks, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Cool tune, man.
And you tell me that worked out pretty good.
What, on here?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's this drummer on this tune that just...
Yeah, who is this guy? Because he needs to be...
It's Gavin, yeah.
Gavin.
No, man, I'll tell you,
It was so long ago, I forget that I could have actually played on.
And kudos to this man here, but he comes in with my stuff. You never heard this before.
No.
This is not an easy tune. It's going from 5 to 6, and willy-nilly kind of almost until you get the arrangement going on. And the drum shredding on this tune is just like immense.
Dude, right back at you, but I'll have to listen to it because
Oh, yeah,
when
it's
did
great.
we record this?
Well, that was probably 2000 and maybe 11, 12, 13 and around there.
Was it?
11, 12. Maybe.
11, 12,
Yeah.
yeah. So the drum tracks, somewhere around 11, 12.
Yeah, incredible stuff though.
Huh.
I think it's you said you were doing the fusion thing, and so you'd been really woodshedding a lot, and so you came in and you just blew this tune into like another dimension. It's pretty great.
Around 2011 was, when I was working a lot with the fusion band and really practicing my ass off.
Yeah.
Where can, I'm going to hold this up again because I think it's worth it. Where can people get a copy of that?
Well,
CD Baby or iTunes?
You can go into iTunes, yeah,
Okay.
for sure. And if you want hard copy, I love hard copy still, man. I like tangible and I like liner notes, So if you can just through Facebook or whatever, call Gavin, and or any local musician, the Musicians Union. Just go online,
Okay.
I've got a page on there and stuff like that. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is number 4 for you, right?
Tis indeed.
Yeah. What are the names of the other? What was the first one called?
Well, first of all, the names of my records. I had a friend of mine who was a high school friend in my first band. He says, you've got to get some better names for your records, man. So the first one is called what the heck is the first one called? Music for Trees.
Music for Trees.
So, you know, and most people go,
your friend may have a point. Yeah.
Well, yeah, everybody's going, well, isn't that a stupid name, you know? And I'm thinking, I was driving along one day, I'm thinking, you know, trees need music, birds need music, and you know, it's a concept. I know it's all wrong, but, you know, anyways.
It's okay, it's yours.
And the second one is almost as bad. It was called I Love Guitar. So I was driving one day and I'm looking at I Love Alberta beef stickers and so I'm thinking, and I was a history major in university, history and classics, which is ancient cultures, and I was thinking, well, what if you're in ancient Egypt and there was like a chariot, and they had a chiseled, you know, in hieroglyphics on the back, you know, I love guitar, and they, you know, so they would have the Eye of Horus, and then they would have maybe a heart shape, and, you know, because it was all symbolism, it wasn't, you know, our lettering, obviously.
Right.
And so originally the cover was going to be like the back end of a chariot going this way with kind of like a, you know,
bumper sticker.
Yeah, bumper sticker from, you know, 4,000 years ago. Right. You know, chiseled into granite. You know.
Right.
So, anyways,
that's a concept.
So, anyways, it's called I Love Guitar.
Kind of like I Heart New York.
Yeah. Kind of. So, anyways, long story short, the third album's called Ear Candy, and a friend of mine said, you always use that term, you know, like something sounds really good, you know, good tone, good tune. Man, that's ear candy, you know. It became kind of like a buzzword after a while. And so after I used it, and then I kept hearing everybody using it, and that was stupid, you know. It's not unique now, you know. So I got a new record I'll have out in about God knows when, maybe a year or 3. I have to come up with a better name though. So so 4 is I was thinking, you know, just I don't know. It's almost like a punctuation mark in the recording though. It's 4 period. Now I've got 4. Right. Everybody knows it because that's what the record's
Well, and I think maybe because it's somewhat non-specific, it's better that way. Like Ear Candy kind of explains something specific, right? This is going to be ear candy. I Love Guitar is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, I dig it.
And Music for Trees, it kind of isn't, but 4 is just sort of androgynous in a sense that it can be whatever you think it is, and it somehow holds some meaning to you, right?
Well, you know, and I mean, there's even like artists like, you know, 4, 8, 10 albums in, they'll just have an album with just their name on it. They don't have an, you know, so
or like Metallica, the Black Album or something.
So what's in an album name, anyways?
All right, exactly.
That's my excuse.
Who's making such a big fucking deal out of this shit? Well, I can't wait to listen to this because it's only been what, 8 years?
Yeah, probably since last drum track.
Yeah, and
6, 7, 8 years. Yeah.
I don't know what the hell I did.
Well, you did some brilliant stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think even probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I had you come in to do a couple of tracks that I needed done. So anyways, that one took a while, needless to say.
Now, and the Ear Candy record also featured a lot of the drumming of Phil Krawchuk.
Phil Krawchuk, yeah.
And you and Phil go back quite a ways, don't you?
We go back to the mid-'80s, yeah. We actually have another project with myself, Phil, and Kevin Sands called the Earth Kings. And that's because we started writing back in sort of the late 80s when I met those guys, and there was a guy named Brian Cowison, anyways, we were writing more for the pop rock market, and it was really good writing. And then we got back together in the mid 2000s, and Phil had a studio out on the West Coast, and we used a guy named Doug Elliott on bass who plays with Colin James and the Odds, so he was our bass guy. And we started writing and recording some stuff, and so we finished this album finally. You know, it was sitting on the shelf for a while, finally mixed and mastered and artwork and all that about 2 years ago, called The Earth Kings, and it's a really neat record. I think I got some in the car, but anyways,
yeah?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear that.
And Phil's a really great drummer, man. He was, I remember when I first met him mid-'80s, and we were doing some clubs and stuff, and he was a Dave Weckl guy, man. You know, the
Phil
school.
was kind of iconic back in the 80s. Like, I remember,
Yeah.
Murph Martin, do you know who Murph Martin is?
Yeah, you bet.
I remember Murph, because Murph is kind of like, you know, what's his name? Cliff Clavin and Cheers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he kind of knows so much shit about so much stuff. And he's got like I don't know what it was. He showed me this video, I think, of Phil with some fusion band in like 87 or something.
Yeah.
And the drumming was ridiculous.
It was
like
really
off the
good.
chart.
Yeah.
Like, I really gained a lot of respect for Phil
Yeah.
when I saw that. I was like, wow, I mean, if the guy can play that.
Yeah, no, he's a good friend, and he's just a good guy, man. And he's his learning curve for being an engineer, a studio engineer. He's got great gear, you know, great mics. He knows how to use it. You know, he's kind of like Jerry Proppy for everybody. Yeah, you know, just this guy that reads between the lines in manuals, and can put sound together nicely.
Yeah, I hadn't met Phil. I mean, I've heard of Phil probably since the 90s, early 90s. And I never met Phil.
Yeah.
And then just before I went to London last year,
Yeah.
I went into L&M and I needed to meet Phil Krawczyk.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, he's just an amazing,
He's a great guy.
just a
Great guy.
genuine dude.
Yeah.
And so are you guys on hiatus right now because Phil's not around, right?
No, Phil went up north to work a golf gig.
Right.
Long story.
Yeah.
But I'll just say that's where he is now.
Yeah.
Phil's actually a golf pro who has broken course records.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he got a degree, or he's educated in management specifically for golf courses and how to run pro shops and
Right, and going up north is not his first kick at the can, right? He's done this before.
Yeah, that's how he got out on the coast, and that's where we were all recording, you know, the Earth Kings. In his studio out there, we were recording other, you know, projects and stuff, but he was a golf pro out at a place called Emerald Ridge.
Okay.
And then he actually did a stint up in Fort McMurray about 2-3 years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, but that's where he is again.
Anyways, back up in Fort Mac.
Yeah. You know, economics
Fort Mac.
ruled. He had to go up there, so make some dough.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember, you know, nothing against Fort Mac, although, you know, but I remember doing a gig up there. I think I was at the casino up there, and it just seemed like a lonely place, you know? And I remember going for dinner, or like going to this diner, and you know, I was wondering, what do you do in this town? Was anybody, you know, I'm here for 3 or 4 days, and I'd like to do something.
Yeah.
And this waitress had nothing she could give me. And I was like, you know, I think I'm starting to get the impression that the best part of Fort McMurray is Edmonton. And it just, you know what I mean? There was just, so I hope he comes back, because if he does come back, Phil, I want you on this show too. So just so you know.
Yeah. He's a good egg, man. Telling it, man. And,
Genuine article.
Yeah. And he's a Grant MacEwan grad, and as well, like from, I think, a number of years ago, so from the music college, which is, you know, something, but he knows, besides percussion and tune percussion, he's also, he writes on keyboard, so he actually writes a lot of music, like harmonic, chordal, you know, scales over chord. I mean, he knows that stuff, right? So, so he's, so he's tuned with that.
I didn't know that about him.
Yeah. So, good cat. Anyways, the Earth Kings, that's a great project. It hasn't been entered in anything yet for awards, so I'm going to put it in the YYC Awards this year.
Are you?
Under rock. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
But it's pretty savvy.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope you get something from that, because, you know, you were nominated last year.
Yeah, for this guy.
This.
Yeah.
And
put it in the world category, and yes, I didn't win.
No.
But that's okay. I didn't expect to. You know, you never know. You know, but you know, to be nominated, it's a nice thing. You know, whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. Well, I know we were Bluesland. You know, was there as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So you know, we didn't win either. So you know, it wasn't necessarily. I mean, it's whether it's about that or not. You know, it was certainly. I'm glad they're doing an award show like that, and I hope it's not weighted on any end. I hope that it's an honest representation of our city and the music in it. That's all.
I hope it is too. You know. You know, and it's a neat thing, because, you know, well, you know, you were there too, and you go in there, and it's, it's the Calgary music community, not all of us, but, those that are, nominated or playing or whatever there. And yeah, there's, we kind of forget there's this whole leg of young guys and guys that are younger than us. I mean, in their 30s and 20s and whatnot that exist on this planet in this city. Some are school players, some aren't. Some are just natural, they're pop, singer-songwriters. But there's that whole world out there that we really don't know anything of. I don't know any of the people, and it was nice to see them recognized and see some names up there and hear some snippets of tunes, and realize that's all there. So
I actually thought the video category, well, the first video, and I don't think it won, but the first video, I don't know if you were there at the time to watch it, but it blew me away. The quality, I mean, it looked like Jerry Bruckheimer. I mean, it was amazing, and I don't think it won. And I was like, how can that not win? I saw the rest of the videos. I mean, it was just a stellar job. And you're right. I think that's the one thing that we need to start focusing on even more. And I'm thankful to some entity for the YYC Awards. I think it's great. But I also think we need to recognize each other a little more. I mean, thank God for the YYC Awards, but if we didn't do that, I don't know that we'd be seeing many of these people around. No. And not only that, it gives us a little bit of confidence. Like when I was there that night, I noticed that everybody seemed pretty proud of themselves, and not arrogantly so.
No.
Just everybody really felt proud to have achieved something and to be noticed.
Well, part of the musical world, it was a reverence almost, it was like, it was honoring the fact that, geez, we got the city and there's stuff going on here. I mean, I know the stuff that I do, and, I think the jazz category, I reckon, the prime time was in there and a few things like that. But these, all these other categories, I don't know. I'm not big into hip hop, but my son does a bit of that, and the little that I've heard, some of it I go, but it's like in any genre I go sometimes, but there's other stuff that catches your ear in any of those genres. In the rock category, there's some pretty. There's I can't remember the band that, I'm not sure if they won. What the heck are they called? Anyways, there's a young band. I think maybe they even won a Juno this year, but Calgary guys. And I remember playing down at one of the summer sort of street festivals about 3-4 years ago, and these guys were playing. And the Static.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
It was,
Static Shift.
Static Shift.
Yeah.
Right.
And these guys, I remember seeing them
Did they play at YYC?
No, but I remember seeing them about 3-4 years ago, and it just reminded me of me. Like, they were just 3 long-haired hippies, with bell bottoms, and they're just doing this jam thing, and it sounded just like Woodstock, man. It was,
really?
And I think their album is a little bit more Gucci'd up. I think they did some production and stuff like that, and I think it's gone quite well. But But anyways, seeing like that kind of stuff going on around here, there's this world of music we don't know about. It's like being disconnected from, any sort of group. The one thing I've been blessed with is I've kind of crossed borders quite a bit. I did a bunch of CPO stuff, and so I got to know. It's a big orchestra, but you kind of know 3 or 4 or 5 people after a while, fairly well, or I sort of enter into the jazz world a little bit, but I do some prime time stuff. So and I worked with a lot of those guys on shows too. Besides just doing but to do that and into the country market, like Sarah Beth and those kinds of things, and then there's those other areas that I know nothing about, and that's where the YYC was kind of an enlightenment. You go, oh, there's a hip hop community here, and I don't even think about that genre of music, and there you are, or the young rock guys, or there's I think a death metal sort of something, I don't know, kind of category, a heavy metal category or something.
I think that's what that video was in that category.
And you listen to that stuff, and it's pretty abrasive, but these guys are just, they're just shredding, they're killer. To play that tempo and just nail it, and the guitar players are so accurate, and
right. And that's you know, we were talking about this a little bit off camera, you know, just about, you know, the education, you know, factor, quotient, you know, to a city like this, when we were talking about, you know, the fact that Berkeley is in Boston. You know, and you wouldn't necessarily think that one of the premier music schools in the world would be in Boston. It might be in New York, it might be in LA or something like that, but no, it's in Boston. And that's not to say that I think Berkeley necessarily needs to exist in Calgary. We don't have to have the Canadian equivalent to that. But I think what we can have here is, and I know some people are trying, I'm not saying that they're not, but I think we could even do a better job of training up a new generation of junior high and high school students and anybody else that wants to learn to carry that torch and to then go to Berkeley or to go to North Texas State in Denton or go to PIT in LA or somewhere like that, and once again, you know, become something.
But that happens to a certain extent, though. I mean, you know, we're talking about Lorna McLaughlin, you know, and you know, and Rich Harding, you know, he teaches at Western, and I think these guys, like, I know Lorna's over the years, she was at Western for a number of years, and there were some of her kids that did go to North Texas and I think Berkeley, and you know, but anyways, so you know, those that are showing promise, and they may not be the best players in the orchestra, but they have a flame under their butts, you know.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, you know, maybe between grade 10 and grade 12, all of a sudden they're just whoa, and they're in the jazz band, and they're doing some improv, and they're maybe taking with like a Pat Belleville or something, or a Brent Saklofske or a Gavin or something, and they're learning, you know, some concepts, and they want more, you know.
Right.
So the good high school teachers will, you know, recommend these schools, and of course it comes down to money too.
Sure.
Right?
And I was talking to John McCaslin not too long ago on the phone, and he was telling me, because I'm somewhat uninformed in this respect, but he was telling me that there's that in some of the schools, high schools, particularly in Calgary, and a number of them, they're really pushing out some good, you know, talent. Use talent for lack of a better term, but those with ability and those that want to learn. There's a lot of kids, you know, coming out of certain high schools, and so I guess what I'm talking about is having more of a community-based thing. Like Humber has a community program that a lot of the students that end up going to Humber come out of that program, and it's also run by Humber, right? But it's more junior high, high school, where they can go outside of school and kind of get their asses kicked in a benevolent way. Nobody puts them down, or you know, it's a very respectful place. But they're there to get their asses kicked and to really learn what they're going to need to know. When they get to that point, and what to expect when they get to that place. That there's going to be people that are going to continue to kick your ass, and you're just going to have to continue to work hard. And I suppose that that's something that I would like to see more of around here, is some place where kids, you know, junior high and high school students can go to get that kind of you know, education and ass whooping, and go, okay, this is what it's all about.
You know, I mean, to put that in perspective for myself, when I was a young guy, the only music program post high school was U of C, and it was a classical program. They had no guitar teacher on staff. You know, for me, I mean, they had a violin, you know, teachers and whatnot. But in the meantime, there was nothing to do with jazz, like within a million miles from here.
Right. When did Mount Royal College, when did that program start? Do you remember?
You know, I am not sure. It could have even started maybe 80s, 90s, but definitely in the 2000s. I don't know. And Grant McEwen too. I mean, I guess that's been around since the 80s or so. But when I was a young guy, I mean,
those jazz programs didn't exist.
There was nothing, you know. Yeah, we had a couple of guys around here. I remember my dad used a guitarist, and but he didn't want to teach, you know. So I mean, any of those concepts, you know, I got the Mel Bay jazz book and the Johnny Smith jazz book, you know, and Mickey Baker, you know, I was getting that stuff, and then I was just more so opening up my ears and listening to what Wes Montgomery was doing, you know, and stuff like that.
And start lifting that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you know.
There's a good topic too. I think we should stop there just for a second, because your dad and God bless him, was a gentleman that I didn't know, but once again, what I knew of him was the fact that he also had a footprint in this city in terms of the music.
Big time.
I don't want to say music scene, because I think in the 50s and even 40s probably, it wasn't a scene, it was a music culture, right, in a sense?
Yeah, you know, I mean, Dad started playing in the 40s, you know, and he was in his 20s, and, you know, he was just a young guy, and he for some reason got into this necessity and this want to be a band leader, you know. So even like, you know, back then there's a Penley's Ballroom and all these places. But anyways, you know, people would go dance and you needed live musicians. And, you know, there's pictures of him like in, you know, he's 22, 23 years old, and he's got the Rhythm Makers, you know, that was his band back then, and then became the Ceclovsky Orchestra and stuff like that. But anyways, there's him, and he, you know, the Army was really like a huge influence in music in Canada. You know, so in Calgary, I mean, he used a lot of Army guys, and these guys were like real players. They were real arrangers. They were like educators. They were college, university degreed people.
Somewhat transient, though, I suppose, right? You were at the risk of that.
To a certain extent, but a lot of the guys I know, like a lot of the guys he used, were kind of locked in for the long haul. There's the odd guy, yeah, I'd get transferred out and. But Dad in the 50s, you know, so now he's in his 30s, and he got the Palliser gig. The Palliser was the biggest hotel. There was nothing else. And he had exclusivity to the Palliser for all the musical events, right? So anything from solo to small combos to gala, big band sort of things. And so he became the orchestra in Calgary.
Really?
50s and 60s.
So the Palliser kind of became a house gig for him.
It did.
Like a kind of highbrow.
So he had, you know, the players. He had the best players. And Dad would go on chart buying sprees every year. I remember, you know, we'd go on vacations down to the States, and he'd go into the music shops, and I'd go with him, and there'd be these rooms like the size of this, full of charts, you know, like arrangements, right? And he would buy new arrangements, and you'd keep up with, you know, whatever's current, and always play like, you know, yeah, the Count Basie's and the Glenn Millers. He'd always have those in his book as well, and then I had the opportunity to play with him, right?
Was that your gig at 15 or no?
No, I was in a rock band.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we were doing, you know, Hendrix, The Doors, all that stuff. But I started playing with Dad when I was probably 17, and you know, some combo gigs and stuff like that. We did Satin Doll and all those tunes, right? You know, and he'd throw some pop tunes in there. And I was a guitar player, so we could do Rock Around the Clock and for the younger people, right. You know. And then I did some big band work with him too, you know. And you know, he usually didn't have you know, there wasn't a guitar book typically in any of that stuff. So I'd sit down with him, just write out chord charts, you know. Right. And then, you know, they'd nod off his solo to me now and then. I was not a really great jazz player then, but I could sort of noodle through it and look somewhat respectable.
So you were, I mean, I just want to, because I was talking to Jim Llewellyn, and you and Jim go way back, I think, right?
Yeah.
Back to the 70s?
Late 70s.
Yeah. And I was somewhat surprised at the things that he was telling me, you know, the fact that the trade winds, or, you know, whatever places, establishments had music in them, would be employing like 4 different bands within that place on any given week. Yeah. And so I want to ask you, was there a golden age of music in Calgary? And if there was, when would that have taken place?
Well, I think if you go just quickly back to my dad's era, you know, the 40s, 50s, I think the 50s in particular, Calgary was a quarter of the population. It was 200,000 people, less than a quarter of the population. I'm sort of guesstimating. And yeah, there was other music venues, there's other bands and things like that. I think that was the golden age as far as pertaining to that term for that particular decade. Dad and well, he was the guy. So the big band I mean, they were legit charts. You know, these were the charts. These were real guys playing them. They were ballroom settings, tuxedos, and gowns for the ladies, right? You know, so I mean, that was the format. So that was, how golden is that? I mean, that's beautiful, right? And everybody's dressed. Everybody knows dance steps. It's not like in the 70s where everybody's, you know, so
doing their own thing.
But then again, like in the 70s, the hotel thing. It was the hotel scene. So yeah, the Trade Winds. There's the Majestic. There was the Crossroads. There was the Westgate.
TNC.
Well, not so much.
No, but the Borough back though, wasn't that kind of a?
Yeah, but yeah. Well, no, I played there once or twice, but you know. Anyways, there's probably about 8 or 10 of these hotels. Everyone had a tavern, which would go 6 nights a week. Everyone had a cabaret, which went Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then you would typically have a lounge, which they would do singles and duos, right? More duos. So a lot of times you do like either a 6-night tavern thing, Monday through Saturday, or you do like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the tavern, and then you go Thursday, Friday, Saturday in the cabaret. Bottom line, the 70s into probably just the 70s, you know, probably in 1980 that started to tank. But the 70s, you know, I'm like 18 years old into, you know, my mid-20s, and I'm playing 6 nights a week until I can't stand it anymore. I mean, it was play.
And making money.
And making money, yeah. And then, you know, in bands, like we would do, you know, travel and play like Red Deer, Edmonton, whatnot. In '78, I think Jim wasn't with us, but the band I was in was called the Silver Bullet Band, and we just called ourselves Bullet because of Bob Seger, right? We were out in Vancouver, we were playing the A rooms out there, you know, and you know, it was a good band, and so bands could kind of do that because we were quote unquote club bands. We were playing mostly covers. We'd sneak in an original now and then. All right. But
not only that, you could work your way to Vancouver, probably, right? Like you could.
Anywhere in between, yeah. I mean, like into the Okanagan, you know, into the mountain towns. I mean, all over the place. I mean, they're into Saskatchewan, heaven forbid, in the winter. You know,
if you had to.
But you know, they were there, and boy, I mean, I think a lot of us, we just played a lot. Plus, you know what the big deal was back then is it made it not competitive so much. There's a really great community of players, and we all respected each other. But we all wanted to be at the top of our game, because you would go into these clubs and, you know, and when you had a night off, you go hear another band, you go, whoa, you know, they're kind of woodshedding on some of this stuff, you know. So, like when Jim joined the band, he said, you guys heard of Tower of Power? And went, yeah, you know, and so we did What Is Hip, you know.
Did you?
Yeah. And we were doing, you know, stuff off the Royal Scam, like some Steely Dan, and, you know, and you know, we're guys in, you know, we're 23, 4 or 5 years old, and we're doing stuff that really takes some ability and you know, some ears, and your soloing has to be, it's just not rock soloing, you know, you have to start jumping into jazz land a little bit, just kind of getting outside on some of this stuff, and funk grooves, you know, things like that, right? So
well, and Jim's another guy, right? Like, I mean, that's a conscientious player, and probably around Calgary would have been known as one of the.
He was kind of, he got into this band called Hammersmith, you know. He probably told, and I mean, they were. There was a guy named Danny Lowe, and they were touring, I think everywhere, you know. But they were doing all opening act gigs. So for Kansas, Jethro Tull. I know he probably told you he got offered the Jethro Tull. I mean, Jethro Tull.
Right.
If you know anything about them, which I'm sure you do, and they're one of my favorite bands still. They're a fusion band. Right. I mean, you listen to these guys, and I've seen them live, and even like 4 or 5 years ago, and they're just like it's like you need a Dave Wakel in there, you know. I mean,
like Aqualung and all that.
Yeah, I mean,
ridiculous.
And their later stuff.
And Jim got offered the gig.
He got offered that gig.
Wow. Did he take it?
No. He'd have to tell you the story, but something went south in the communication.
Oh shit!
And I can't remember what the story was.
That's okay, because I had him on the show not too long ago, and we actually I don't think don't remember him telling me that.
Yeah.
At least specifically, and if he did, it eluded me.
Yeah.
But he certainly would have been one of those guys then, right?
Yeah, he was.
I mean, not that he isn't now, but he certainly had been.
Yeah, yeah, and he still plays great, you know. And he's like you, and like I still practice 3 hours a day. You do, Jim still does, you know. And
Right.
and so his discipline with his instrument. I mean, it's something that, you know, we've known players through the years, and yeah, maybe they're not practicing as much. Maybe they stop playing. I mean, I'll never stop playing. I'll get up until my last breath every morning and play Bach, and then I'll sit down and I'll work on Donna Lee, you know, and I mean, that's my day, you know. That's 3 hours of that a day, you know. And Jim's like that too. He just loves it, whether he's gigging a lot or not. He loves to sit down and hit those things. And
He is that guy. As a matter of fact, he paid me a great compliment in a sense, because we were talking about it, and during our conversation, and I did this lesson on the Alan Dawson, the rudimental ritual, which is something that Tony Williams went through, and Vinny and Steve Smith and all these guys. And so I did a lesson on it on my lessons, my video lessons. And Jim said, yeah, I went out the next day and bought the book. I'm like, really?
That's great.
Like, yeah. He said, I had to do it, and now I had to sit down and work on it. And I've been meaning to contact him just to see how it's going for him. Because it's 86 rudiments, or 84, something like that. 86, I think. 86 rudiments that you have to learn by memory.
Yeah.
And it took me a year and a half to learn them by memory.
Yeah.
So, but I thought that was so inspiring. You know, here's a guy that's already done the work, you know, and has been where he's been musically, you know, got offered the Jethro Tull gig of all gigs, and here he just wants to work harder. And that's so inspiring to me as a player.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, that it's almost a buzzword now, but it's called passion. You know, I mean, I still got a fire in my rear end, you know.
And to me, that's true passion. You know, it's sort of like the word narcissism these days. It gets thrown around a little too much.
Yeah.
Just because now it's a new word, and maybe there's a few more of them than there used to be.
Yeah.
But passion is another word I think we take for granted. And when you see a guy like that, you know, is now in his 60s, and, you know, once again, has done all the things that he's done, and tells me, oh, I went yesterday and bought the book.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, that is, I suppose, the definition of passion.
Sure, you know, and you know, I mean, I play with him, you know, like, you know, and
Blueprint, right?
yeah, you know, we don't play that often, you know. We used to play more, but when he joined the band, it's, you know, I mean, it's a pub. We do pubs. Like, where else are you going to play in a band like that? We do some really adventurous stuff, some Joe Bonamassa kind of things, and and some, you know, really great stuff, you know. And you know, we'll be playing, like, and Jerry's in the band, right? So, so there's Jerry and myself, and Jerry's like, it's music all day long. For me, it's like, you know, a number of hours. Jim too. We got a killer frontman that can sing like dog pitch all night long. I mean, we do some Sting stuff, and it's just like bang on, you know.
Really?
But anyways, a really great band, and we're playing pubs, you know, and but that's okay, you know, because we're playing, and we get to take our passion. I hate to use that all the time, but then again, I don't hate to use it, because that word, I think it's overused, right? And so you have to kind of cut to the bottom line of what that word means. And I know you and I and Jerry and Jim Llewellyn's and many other people I know musically in this city and on the planet. There's a definite, that word is the word, and it's not a lightly taken word.
It's just because people used to use that word when they meant it.
Yeah.
Now people don't necessarily mean it. They just...
You got to find your passion.
Right.
Have you found your passion?
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, like underwater basket weaving. Is that your, and it's like, no, you know, passion comes. I think the passion part of it comes from a very early age too. I think you learn very early what you're passionate about. That thing that gets you up in the morning and puts you to bed at night.
Yeah.
You know, I know for me it was very few things. It was hockey, and it was drums, music, and you know, I was 8 years old, and we went to the Ice Capades, and my you know, they travel with bands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the band is all roped off, took the seats out, and they're over there in the this section. And so I asked my mom, and I'm 8, you know, Moncton, New Brunswick. And I asked my mom, you know, can I go over and just sit there? And she's like, yeah, you know, just, you know, even back then you didn't say be careful, you know.
Yeah.
And you probably don't have to say it now, we're just more stupid. You know, she just, yeah, just go, you know, I want to keep my eye on you, and just know where you are.
Yeah.
And so I went over and I sat there, and I mean, to me, it was that roped off area, almost, it was like the Holy Grail. You know, it was like there's a rabbit with big teeth that was going to bite my head off if I tried to, you know, grab the chalice from within this roped area. It just glowed to me, and it was so intense and yet frightening and yet exhilarating, and that was just the space.
Yeah.
You know, the drums, and, you know, and the amp, and you know, and the stand the guy puts his horn in, and all those things were just mystifying to me.
Yeah.
And I made sure that I sat 2 rows back. I didn't sit in the row right in front of the ropes. I thought that was disrespectful. Mm-hmm. I have to sit a row back from that. Yeah. And so I sat there, and then all of a sudden, you know, out of the corner of my eye, the musicians walked down, you know, almost like priests of a royal, you know.
You Buddhist
know,
monks, you know.
Yeah, right? Except cool.
Yeah.
And hip.
Yeah.
And once again, you know, all at once frightening.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm at 8, and so you know they slither underneath the ropes, you know, like they've been doing this their whole life, and they just know how to move, and you know, I'm just sitting there, you know, almost ready to pee my pants, and I can't breathe, and the drummer sits down behind his drums, and you know, once again, a god, you know, to me, and I'm just like, you know, like, and I can't move even, and he turns around and he looks at me and he goes, oh hey, and I'm like, and I couldn't say anything, you know. And just the fact that he talked to me was something. And so you know, he kind of busies himself doing what he has to do, getting his charts out or whatever, and I'm just so intrigued and enthralled, and yet don't want to speak to this iconic figure that is looming in front of me. And finally, he just turns around and he goes, you know, so what's up? You know, and once again, I can't speak, you know, I can't say anything. I can't formulate words to make sentences at that point. And, but I think he just thought it was cute. And he's like, do you play the drums? And I'm like, you know, and so he, you know, whatever, and then cut to it, he turns around and he says, do you know how to do a single stroke roll? And I'm like, do you mean like that? And he's like, well, you can do that, can't you? And I was like, and he goes, why don't you open the ice capades?
No way.
You know, then I just think I pooped myself, but you know what I mean? That's when I needed my mom. I didn't need her up to that point.
And you did?
So I'm like, well, I didn't say it. What do you say? You're 8 years old.
Yeah.
But what do? I mean, I'm trapped because he's behind the ropes and I'm still here, and I can't really believe what I'm hearing him say. Anyway, and he says, no, you come underneath the ropes, and what do you say? It's like going into the holiest of holies, you know, where you have to tie a rope to yourself just in case you die, because you're not supposed to be in there, and then they can pull you out. It was just, so I go in, and it's the ice capades, and those were huge in the 70s.
Of course.
Yeah, like it was packed. It was the Montreal whatever.
You had to be top call player, man, to get the gig too.
Yeah,
right?
like you had to be a ridiculous cat back then. I'm 8, and I'm not. You know, except for the fact that I'm 8. You know, there's nothing good about anything I can do, but I can do a single stroke roll. So, you know, he says, I'll let you know when it is. And he was so easy about it, you know, and me, I'm hyperventilating. I thought I was just going to fall over behind the timps, you know, because it was timpanis too. And I'm like, I've never seen a timpani. And I think he might have had to put a box out so that I could actually reach it, you know. And I fucking played this role. And then he comes in and he's, you know, he told me, I'll let you cut. I'll let you know when, you know, you cut. And then he came in with a cymbal crash or something to dig it into some, you know, hip groove. And I, you know, put the sticks down, and he didn't even have to tell me. I just went right underneath the ropes again and sat 2 rows back. and sat there for the whole first, you know,
Yeah.
until the first intermission. And I was just blown away. That, and there's no words to describe that, really.
Yeah,
I mean, blown
yeah.
away is, and then so my mom is freaking out because I haven't come back, and she thought, well, he's going to go for a minute, and I just sat there the whole time, you know,
Yeah.
just, you know, and so she finally comes over during the intermission. She's a little freaked out, and you know, she's like, you got to come sit, and I'm like, no, I got to stay here. I have, please, you know, almost in tears, you know.
And she
that
didn't
she's
know
gonna
you'd played, though?
Pull me away. No, she did.
Oh,
but
she did, okay.
She didn't know. I don't think she understood what it meant to me. And even if she did, she didn't.
Yeah.
Only I kind of knew what this meant to me.
Yeah.
And so, and the band leaves, and I don't talk to the drummer. I think he kind of just gave me a wink, you know, like, good job. And they went off to do whatever they did, right? Probably smoked up in the green room. Give a shit. And I just sat there the whole time, you know, really, in a sense, unable to move, not believing what I had just accomplished,
Yeah.
or whatever. And then they come back for this, you know, for the second
Yeah.
part of the show, and he once again goes through his, you know, whatever his ordeal is, and he turns around and he says, do you want to do it again? And I'm like,
Yeah.
and so he lifts up the rope, and I go back into the holiest of holies,
Yeah.
and he nods me, I play it. Once again, I slide underneath the ropes and sit 2 rows back until the end of the show. And that's all I did, but that was like I played the entire show. That's what it felt like to me. I was, you know, and then after that, he turns around, he says, come here, you know, and I went over and he said, you know, this is your thing, man. You love this, don't you? And I was like, and he goes, well, I want you to have this, and he hands me $6. And he said, this is your first professional gig.
Oh my goodness.
And so,
Yeah.
you know, I blamed you for your inspiration, but I really have him to blame.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
for the rest of my life. But
Yeah.
I say that in jest. That was, you know what I mean? And with the way music is today, I don't know that we're giving kids that opportunity
Yeah.
the way we used to.
Yeah.
You know, Ice Capades has been canned now, you know, like the music's been canned
Sure, yeah.
for the last 20 years,
Yeah.
25 years.
Well, you know, I mean, we were blessed. Like I said, I mean, I played so much when I was a young guy, and really through my life to speak. You know, like, I mean, you know, doing theater and all that. You know, but that, you know, for sort of honing your skills and finding your, like we were talking about, your voice. You know, and yeah, I was doing cover tunes in the '70s, but you know, when it came to soloing, I never really comped a solo like off a record. I mean, very seldom, once in a while. Like, I mean, if you're doing Hotel California or something, right? You know, then yeah, you would lift that. But you know, any of the Steely Dan stuff, you know, that was the one thing about back then. All the guitar players, we would. It was kind of a thing where we didn't have to play the solo, you know, and we could be our own voice, and that's and just playing, like, you know, 3 nights, 6 nights a week for eternity back then, you know, and then yeah, going out to the coast for me was huge, man. I remember we had a Sunday off, and we went to. I was out there for a number of weeks, or a month or 3 or something like that. But we went to a club, and we saw a band called Zingo, and it was Bryan Adams' guitar player. Scott. Anyways, and he looked like Jeff Beck, you know, I mean, back then, and he had a white Strat, you know, but you know, out there, you know, you could be your own voice out there too, and people would come out and go, wow, like, where are you guys from? Like, you know, where'd you learn that stuff, you know? And well, we're from Calgary, you know, it seemed like a little town compared to that, but you could play your butt off. And even in the 80s, I mean, it sort of transitioned into like Orestes and Dickens and those clubs. They were 5 nights a week, and then they would hone it down to 3 or something like that, but we still played a ton. And then for me, you know, early 90s, like, theater kicked in. I mean, I got hired to do Stage West, you know, and from that, I mean, I was, you know, the side gigs I got from that were just non-ending. It just went on and on and on. I mean, and so I'd have subs sometimes for, you know, for the theater gig. You know, I'd bring Brad Steckel, who's now been doing it for like seems like ever, but I mean, I had that gig.
Is Brent still doing it?
Yeah.
He is.
I had that gig for 10, 12 years, and he would sub in, and a guy named John Thiel, you know, would sub in. And from that, and then I had to just say no. I was going to be turning 50 in a while, like 2002, 3, and I just said, I don't think I want to be 50 and doing this, and you know, plus I was busy with my stores and stuff like that, and I was playing my butt off everywhere else, you know, just from being recognized from doing that, you know. But I know in a nutshell, I mean, I just had this, and guys my vintage, like at least around here, we just had this opportunity to play and play and play and play and play. I mean, you had to be good, you know. But there was places, and yeah, you would have your game to a good level. I mean, like, personally, I'm not sure about all the other players around here, but I was practicing my butt off back then, and I still do, because I just love it.
Right.
And you're always going to learn something. Your hands have to stay in shape, and your hands can always be better.
Well, Jim talked a little bit about that too, and you know, of course, his logic is perfectly sound. You know, when back then you played, you know, 6 nights a week for 52 weeks a year, and with the same guys, and there was no way to not get good. I mean, because also if you cared about your instrument at all, then you were also practicing during the day. And of course you could, you had the luxury of it, because you were making money every night. And your rent was a quarter or less of what you made, right? And you know, in terms of a pack of cigarettes, if you smoked, it was 35 cents. You know, a banana was, you know, less than a cent.
Nickel.
Yeah, right? And so everything was taken care of. Didn't seem like anybody was suffering. And people were expressing themselves, and they were doing the things that they loved to do. And there was community, like you said. Nobody was being a shithead to anybody. People were really tight. And because there were A rooms and B rooms and C rooms, you had to be good. Right?
Yeah. So I mean, that was a blessing, you know. And plus, if it's something that you just like, you just dig so much. I mean, I wanted to be a guitar player like when I was like fetal, I'm sure, you know. I mean, you know, and then you know, I remember when I heard, you know, I'm a young cat, and I'm listening to like Love Me Do by the Beatles, and that eerie sound, or the Stones, like just that, you know, like Brian Jones, and you know, I mean, the stuff he was playing, and then you transition into, I mean, it had me, man, you know, and it still does. So there's guys like that, like you and I, like I said, Jim, and you know, Jerry, and I mean, guys, we'll just have that fire under our asses until our last breath. You know, I mean, it ain't gonna go away, and it may just keep getting bigger. You know? Maybe,
right?
You know.
I know mine has. You know, it's funny, you can't run from that.
No.
You know, I remember one time a guy cursed me, although God bless him, because he's really right, but. And it was a musician here in town. I can't remember who it was, but you know, I saw him on the street or something, and he said, you know, what are you doing these days? And I said, you know, I'm working for Tellus. And he's like, oh, you know, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, you know, like, you know, this music thing, you know, I'd done a little bit of Stage West, and, you know, I'd done a lot of stuff. And I said, you know, but really, you know, it's time to
get a day job.
Yeah, and to get smart, you know. And he just looked at me and he said, you'll be back. And I was like, don't say that to me.
Yeah.
Don't curse me like that.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely right. I got a call from Royal Caribbean, and they said, we're going to fly you to England in 3 days. And I called my boss at Tellus on the way to the airport. I said, I won't be coming in today. And she's like, you know what? I should be really pissed off, and I probably would be at anybody else except you. You have to do this. And I was so grateful that she understood. That she knew that that's where I needed to be. And so I guess, you find yourself, I suppose the only shame is that there's just far less of it now, and far less of a way or an ability, or you have to be extremely creative now to find ways to monetize what you didn't even have to worry about monetizing You just had to be good.
It's just and I mean, this is going back to my youth, which is many, many years ago. But it's a total paradigm shift. First of all, we didn't have jazz schools up here. We didn't have, we didn't have the schools. We didn't really have teachers. I never had a teacher that was savvy enough to teach me the stuff I was actually playing, right? So there's that. So we didn't have that education. So we had to do it on our own. We had to learn it on our own. So our ears got really frickin' big. Right. We're listening to, like, I loved it all. I mean, I loved South American music back then, like indigenous stuff. I mean, jazz, and whatever. So I mean, my ears got real big, and I could sit down and I could lift stuff and play it and listen to it, and not even play it, and know how it goes. You walk away, it goes 1/4 minor 6, whatever. I mean, especially pop music, and so you didn't have that, but but on the other hand, you had the ability to play all the time. So now we've got schools. And yeah, we don't have a jazz school here anymore, but you can go up to Grant McEwen. I mean, you can go places. Right. You can go down.
There is Ambrose here.
Ambrose, right?
Yeah.
And like Steph teaches there, I think, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there are places to go. You can find that, but now there's no places to play.
Right.
So it's like it's gone like that, right?
Right. Absolutely,
yeah.
It has.
So these guys coming out of the schools who know, like, all the stuff, and sometimes it depends on, I think, the individual teacher too, but I think sometimes it's been handed to them. All the info is here. It's all in the book. I'm teaching it. We got like one-on-one classes. We got combo classes. You're gonna, so they come out of that, and they all kind of know that stuff. Some of them have like a specific flair, but sometimes it is, like I said, cookie cutter maybe. I mean,
You mean in the colleges now?
Yeah, I mean, they're all coming out with the same stuff. We had to discover this on our own, unless we so happened to, go to Berkeley, which, a few people did from up here, like Kai did, I think, and a few people, but
yeah.
But anyways, and but then they get out, and what are they going to do with that? There's kind of a,
well, that's just it.
There's kind of, and it's like any profession. I mean, a bachelor degree in psychology, it's a dime a dozen. A master's degree in psychology, it's a dime a dozen. Mm-hmm. Almost like doctorates are now, right? Mm-hmm. But so these guys are walking out anyways with all this knowledge and nowhere to put it, nowhere to play it,
Right.
So
that's the difference too. Not that there could have been great education here back in the 60s and 70s. There just wasn't. But what there was the ability to play and create, and the fact that I think an industry had not yet eaten its children. You know what I mean? Like taken mm-hmm. over so much and taken away so much of our ability to just be musical and mm-hmm. be musicians. And be able to be self-sufficient with that, so that we could continue to create and continue to be better at what we do. Now, guys, if they go to music school at all, they're nervous as hell when they get out, because what am I going to do? There's this guy online on YouTube, David Kola, who's a Berkeley cat, and I've been, he's kind of chronicled a little bit of his, his journey through that, and then on to cruise ships. And then just recently, like a couple days ago, I saw one with him leaving LA. And this guy's kind of a motherfucker. Like, he's a great player. Mm-hmm. And he's not that old. He's probably in his late 20s, maybe mid-20s right now. And he said, and it kind of showed him packing up. And he said, I have to leave LA. There's just nothing going on. So I'm going back home to the Midwest, wherever he's from. Mm. And I thought, a guy that plays like that, yeah. in 1975 would never be going back home.
Yeah.
Certainly not with the tail tucked between his legs, and without any prospect of what he was going to do. He said, I got some gigs back in Ohio or whatever, wherever he was from.
Yeah.
But a guy that plays that well back in the day that you're talking about would never have left LA.
No.
Unless they ran him out of town for some reason.
Yeah.
He would have been playing now and being self-sufficient and taking care of himself and a family and everything else, because he was allowed to do this. And you know, I don't know where we're headed. I think that it's a shame that we've lost that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason for it, and I think that reason can actually be probably chronicled if we go back and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
There are absolute distinct reasons for that don't necessarily have to do with you and I, because I think if it was up to you and I, nothing would have changed.
Well, it's budget. You know, I mean, if you're playing clubs, you know, and jazz clubs or rock clubs or whatever. I mean, you know, they're starting up and closing down, like, you know, every day around here, and budget is something, but it's a live music thing. Like I think it's more like the patrons. You know, when we used to play the clubs, like the hotel clubs in the 70s, it was packed every night. The taverns were big rooms. I mean, they were expansive, long rooms. The cabarets, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, that's what all young people did. They went to the cabaret and they you know, they drank beer and they'd go out and smoke a reefer, and the band, and it was just throngs of people. That was the scene. That was the young people scene.
Lined up around the block.
Yeah. And now, live music is just not, I don't know what's going on with it. I mean, I think there's some things maybe that are not that great, as far as like the bands aren't that great. I don't know, but the whole shtick has changed, like what people want to hear. Of course, you know, there's things like DJs came along the way, and you know, I'm not sure what else. But Disco, yeah.
Disco took musicians out of clubs,
yeah,
and it put it, and yet, you know, the people that frequented clubs that didn't play music, that were going to see a band, now could go and not have to worry about seeing a band, and still dance. There's a story an Australian guy told me, a drummer actually, and I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's, you know, mythical, but he told me this, so I'll tell it. He said that when disco started coming in Australia back in the 70s, they actually instituted a law in Australia that in order to have disco music in your club, and I don't know necessarily what constituted disco music, where the line was.
Oh, you mean, okay, yeah.
Like where the line was crossed, and this isn't disco and this is.
Okay.
But obviously they worked it out. I mean, I guess we kind of know what's disco and what isn't.
Yeah.
If you were going to play disco in a club, it had to be with live musicians. Otherwise, you could not have disco being played by DJs. And he said to this day that saved the ass of the music scene in Australia.
Wow.
And you can still go and watch people playing clubs. Now, I don't really have any context for that because I've never been to Australia, but if that's the truth, God bless them.
Yeah.
They saw something that was going to deteriorate not only music, but the culture of that country.
You know, things like, for drummers, like the drum machine all of a sudden, you know, was problematic, you know. But, you know, when disco came out, we were still playing all the time. And there were discos, you know, but although that's when it started to phase out, right? You know, like say circa 1980, to round it off to a zero. Yeah, that's when I'll actually, now that I think of it, when something takes effects, it comes into play, like disco comes into play, like what, 76, 7 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then it takes time for it to actually really rear its head up and really take effect. And actually, now that I think of it, 1980-ish is pretty much when the Trade Winds and the Majestic and all those places we were playing kind of like stopped.
That's right.
Or definitely like started to squelch it down, and you know, as far as live entertainment, it was pretty much done, you know, in those places by 1980, 81, 82, right?
Right. And do you think that was the first blow? It seems to me like it was. Like everything up until then was cool. And nobody could foresee an end.
Yeah.
Everybody was just like, God damn, this is going on forever. Good for us.
Yeah. No, that was the first blow for sure. You know, I think of things like, you know, in history, there's an event in history. It could be a war, it could be like a religious kind of change or something like that. Sometimes it's immediate, but most of the time it takes time to trickle down and really really cause, get to the end of its effect. And I think of like with my store, okay, 2008, October, right? Everything blows up on the stock market. And my business was just like going like gangbusters. It was crazy. 2008, okay. I remember I was down in the Caribbean with Dennis, doing one of his things, and all of a sudden it's all over the news, and we're playing in Beckway or somewhere in the Eastern Caribbean, right? I come back and well, everything's okay, we're still selling guitars and students are still coming in. 2009's okay, 2010, 2011, I'm noticing our student population is starting to go down. People aren't buying the product like they used to, and so that trickle effect, of it really kind of taking and rearing up and causing issues, with things like that. And same with music. You go back now, you look at music, disco, 76, 1980, 81, Trade Winds, Majestic, Crossroads, all these guys were shutting down their musical venues.
And it doesn't even seem like economics played a part at that point.
It just, the economics just shifted to a disco,
Right.
Yeah.
And so now we don't need you. Now we can pay a DJ. We can pay one guy. So we don't need to worry about 5 hotel rooms.
Yeah.
And we don't need to worry about paying 5 guys. Plus, there's not 5 guys to be a pain in the ass. There's only one.
Yeah. And at that point in time, in the 70s, the patrons were our vintage too. They were like 20s, in their 20s, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, So then the transition, if you remember, we were talking a little while ago, it went into like the downtown clubs, like the rest days and stuff like that. Now I'm 28, 29, 30, into my 30s now. Those people start in that age group that were going to those hotel clubs are now going to Arrest Days and Dickens and Morgan's and some of those places and Ponchos and these places, right? Right. And
so a new crowd has like that. So they're following you.
Well, they're the same people that were going to the hotel clubs, right? So they still want live music,
And so what's happening to the generation just before that? Like now you're 29, you're 30. What's going on with a 20-year-old? What are they doing?
I'm not sure where they were finding their musical, outlets and places to go to. I know, like teaching-wise, I was teaching a lot in the early '80s, and the kids all wanted to learn. They all wanted to learn Rush. They all wanted to learn. Van Halen was big and stuff like that. And there's no venues in town where there's bands that were doing Rush, and so I don't know where these people like that would have been 10 years younger or so. I don't know where the heck they were going. So I can't tell you. I don't know.
Well, that and I suppose that would have been me because I'm about 10 years younger than you, right?
Yeah.
So, well, the thing is, I never went to bars. I hated bars.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, I never went to a bar.
Yeah.
And to this day, if I'm not playing in a bar, I won't go to a bar. I've just never been interested in that culture.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in playing. So, but where would a guy of my generation gone? Well, we still would have gone. What was that? Southland Mall, or not Southland Mall? That hotel that's Malarkey's or whatever, right? Do you remember that?
It was a club,
Yeah.
Kind of
Hospitality Inn.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And then there was a club next to it. I guess a lot of people started going there, and once again, a lot of that started to be DJs.
Yeah, it was canned.
It wasn't bands, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's where people my age would have been hanging out now, and nobody really seemed to care. Nobody really understood that it might actually be damaging something.
Yeah.
And I suppose to make a case for something being damaged, you have to ask yourself, was there something to damage, or was it just a progression? So did anybody get hurt? But I'll tell you what, I came up with the idea, being 10 years behind you, I came up with the idea. Well, I said this a couple of weeks ago, I don't know, Emery or somebody like that, but I was born into an era of rock and roll. Mm-hmm. So, excuse me, until somebody told me that that the world has existed through an infinite number of transmutations, in our societies and the things that we consider popular, and for eons has changed, and this is come and gone, and like anything else. For me, as a kid, I was born into rock and roll. So for me, it always existed, and it will always exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just was fortunate enough to, love this thing. And I suppose, I don't know if I came in at the wrong time, but at some point, I realized that no, I'm dealing with just progressions of age in terms of world and society.
Oh, for sure.
And that maybe it was that rock and roll wasn't supposed to last forever, just like Gregorian chant wasn't.
Well,
and it was supposed to have its place.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of there's a friend of mine is really into like some of the newer bands, and played me a few things, and that's some pretty good stuff. It's still alive,
right?
It's just and so are Gregorian chants. I mean, you can go, you can, I mean, I've got some Gregorian chants at home. I mean, I love musicology, and the history of music. And there's, in any city in Calgary, there's early music players, that will play on traditional instruments from the Renaissance, or, so that, it just so happens it's not like on the pop stations, and
right.
So I think everything kind of will always kind of go on there, like when it comes to any sort of, I think, genre and historical point in pretty much anything, but we're talking music, it's always going to have something that's going to keep it alive. Like, once again, I mean, you can go to any university and go to like the classical music departments, the music departments, which are, there's jazz and classical, but the classical guys and the history of music, and that older, music from, the medieval points and Renaissance and Baroque and all that, that's always going to continue, It's what's popular. But for pop music, it's almost like, I think the anthill got kicked in, and I think it's trying to find, the definition of it. I mean, like the pop music stations right now, you listen to this stuff, and I guess this is the Selena Gomez's and the Weekends and guys like this, right? Which, honestly, the Grammys, I look at the nominees and I go, I don't know any of these people.
Right.
Oh, Elton John, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
He's getting a Lifetime Achievement Award or something, But then I listen to The Odd Thing and Taylor Swift, and bless their hearts, man. Like, the stuff is produced really great and professionally and all that. But I don't know where there for young people that would want to go to a club and hear that and dance to it, I don't think there is anywhere. I mean, when these people come to Calgary and play the Dome, and you have to pay $300 to see them,
right? Then you go to see them,
or they've got it on their devices, and their.
I think for me, part of the problem, one of the biggest problems is corporatism has taken over the ability for people to enjoy music the way we used to enjoy it. But I think you're right in terms of music. Music will survive. Music is bigger than us. It's kind of like the planet, right? We're not going to destroy the planet. When the planet has had enough of us, like George Carlin says, it'll just annihilate us. It'll keep going.
Yeah.
And I think music is the same way. Music is too big.
The colleges are full.
Right, but even just the sort of the next big thing, or what is the next big thing? Or where is music? Where's music going?
Yeah.
What is the next thing? What is the journey?
I've got this theory, and I don't know if it's a theory or it just is an ism, and I don't know how much I really believe in this theory, but the fact is, music's got 12 tones, and that's all. I mean, you can go quarter tones if you want to get really kind of quirky and cause people to kind of be suicidal and stuff, but it's 12 tones, and you can 12 times whatever, it can be infinite, but we latch onto certain forms and certain styles, and they tend to become popular. And right now there's a churning of, I think even in, depends, like in the jazz world, for example. I mean, like I said, I saw Ravi Coltrane, and I thought, well, there's some cutting edge stuff going on there. You know, I mean, it's 12 tones, but man, he's cutting some new territory here. Pop music, it's like, you know, you can listen to like typically like 4 bars, and you go, yeah, well, that was used in that tune, like back, you know, in the 50s and Beatles. I mean, you know, these things. So, anyways, I've kind of thought like 12 tones, and how much can you do with that, anyways? You know, like for like, you know, well, really, you know, I mean, they're playing music like, you know, look at temple paintings from Egypt. I mean, they had lyres and they had different instruments, and
so
they
were using the same 12 tones.
It hasn't been documented, but you know, like documented music from early Christianity music, you know, and probably back to, you know, ancient India and stuff like that, you know, going back like 1,000 years for sure. You know, documentation of notes, right? And it's 12 tones, man. I'm thinking, has it all been done? You know,
right?
Or the best stuff has been done, you know. So now it's just this stuff that's kind of like coming back up and regurgitating. And yeah, once in a while there's something that's kind of novel, but
well, there is an ecclesiastical approach to this, which, you know, says that there is nothing new under the sun. So I would agree with you. The thing is that I think when rock and roll came in, it was electrified, and those 12 tones took on new shapes.
Yeah.
You know, and new energies. When the electric bass, they say, came in, that changed music, you know, in a way that music hadn't been changed for centuries. Because now you could lift up the bottom end.
Yeah.
Right? Like a drummer back in the 30s and 40s had to support the bottom end because it was all upright bass and you couldn't hear it.
You couldn't hear him.
Yeah, a drummer that didn't play 4 on the floor and play it loud was a drummer that didn't work.
Yeah.
Right? But once the bass was electrified, then the whole bottom end started being supported.
Yeah.
And
well, like we were talking about, you know, philosophy in general, but the philosophy of music, you know, like not talking music notes and harmonies and stuff, but talking about life. You know, and integrating that art into it to, you know, we didn't really talk about, you know, creating an individual voice, you know, like you've learned some stuff, maybe you've learned it on your own, maybe you were schooled, but creating your own person, your own voice, you know, whatever instrument it is, or your writing voice, you know, your compositional voice.
And even outside of music itself, what is your voice on a planet? Who are you as an individual?
Yeah.
And that's what I want to get down to on this show. I mean, you know, I think it's just the fact that we took something that meant so very much to us and became very good at a certain discipline.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know, we are even more than music ourselves.
It's deeper. It's spiritual. It's you know, it's metaphysical. It's like you know, it's a big picture. Like the whole universe is a big picture. And we've got this thing called music, which is very akin to the big picture. I mean, it touches that, and if you approach it that way, you know, if you approach it that way, and your individual instrumentation or how your whole creative mind works with the actual information you got. I mean, creating your thing, like I've got my thing. I mean, I think it's pretty unique. I mean, but it's my thing. It's all this junk
it has to be unique.
You know, it's like when I first, you know, came out of the womb, and I probably heard, you know, maybe I don't know, maybe Perry Como or something, you know, you know, and you know, and all this stuff glues together, like stuff like Barbara Streisand, People. I love that song, and I know there's something in there that has at times come out. I mean, you know, all these influences, and it kind of comes out like that, but it's a truism that you have, an altruism that you have in your musical kind of makeup that sort of spits out. And I'm not sure if everybody has something like that. I think maybe they're capable of it. You know, there's some players that are just, they read the dots and they spit it out. And they go home, and I know a lot of players and some really like a major like degreed people, like symphonic orchestral players. that don't write a note, you know, but they love playing, you know, and they love, you know, they love Shostakovich, and they love, you know, Mahler and the big guys, and they love, you know, going back and playing like a, you know, a Bach fugue or something, you know, but they don't have something. It's either hasn't been nurtured, or it's just not part of their makeup. It's not part of their DNA.
Sure, and yet I think there's a connection to music that, in a sense, we all share. And you know, you ask, do people have something? It's my theory and my contention that almost all of us have something. It's just that very few of us, in today's economy and in the economy of the last 40 years, or maybe a little bit more than that, have what's the word? Have laid down for something far less, and just a comfortability.
Yeah.
So that we can go through life. Because I've thought about this lately. What is life just to live it? Is it much? And this may be a nihilistic view, I'm not sure. But if I'm just born to live and to make enough money so that I have a house, so that I have food to eat, and I go through life not necessarily doing what I want to do and being who I believe I should be, because, and maybe taking a vacation once a year, only to get away from that thing that I hate so much. Am I really living life? You know, am I really being true and honest to that thing that put me on this planet to begin with, that said, you need to go there and do this? Now, I am being slightly altruistic when I say this, but then again, that's kind of my experience. And I don't mean that, I think that we all have that. I think that by and large, probably most of us, were not meant to dig a ditch, except the fact that a ditch needed to be dug. I think that there is something within all of us that far exceeds the mundane and the day-to-day. It's just that now we have to do that.
Well, you have to find it, and I think a lot of people don't find it. I think musicians that really have it, like, in a big passionate way, we've kind of found it, or at least something that's kind of like it. There's a lot of people that are just fine with doing 9 to 5, and they could be working for the city and digging ditches. Not that they dig it, or excuse me, but not that they like doing it, but, you know, I mean, they get a good check and they got benefits, you know, and you know, they got like beer in the fridge, and you know, and they can, you know, pay for Netflix, you know.
Right.
And some people are 122% content with that. And I don't think it's just that they think they are. I think they truly are. We so happen to have stumbled upon something that at a young age, and typically that's how music kind of inserts itself in your, you know, maybe from birth, maybe pre-birth, maybe it's in our genes or DNA, whatever. But we've been bitten with this thing that is so consuming, and I mean, you dream it, you think it,
right?
You know, you're just walking around and you're thinking it. You know, you're thinking a song or something or whatever, you know, but some people don't have that, and I think most people don't have that, and they seem to be pretty darn content, and I think they genuinely are. And other people are you know, they really get off on, you know, astrophysics, as passionately as we get off on, which is somewhat related, actually.
Well, no, it is related. See, here's the thing, I kind of disagree, and you know, I hate to get off on a tangent because I want to wrap up here, but here's my contention, and you know, this is something that actually Noam Chomsky said not that long ago. I was watching something, and he said that wages, that the institution of a wage, that a person would make a wage, was only one step when it was instituted, when the term wage and what that means actually came into being. It was only one step up from slavery. The only thing that made it different than slavery, or from slavery, was the fact that it was temporary, whereas slavery was forever, for your whole life. But if you had to earn a wage, it was like being a slave, almost entirely and exactly, except the fact that it was just to get you through whatever it was you had to go through. And I don't understand the whole historical element of it and what all that meant. But I find that very interesting. Then, so you say, like the guy goes out and he digs a ditch, he earns a wage, and then he has time for this other thing. I really think, and I know you know what I'm going to say, but I think that guy, that thing that he does after he's earned his wage, the step above slavery, is what he should be doing most of all. And digging a ditch is only something he does because the community needs it. The community says, if we're going to survive, we need to dig this ditch. And everybody goes, okay, I'm going to put away the lyre today, or whatever, because we have to dig this ditch. But tomorrow I'm picking up the lyre, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
And that is how I make my living. That people pay me for a service that I provide, not a wage from a company that says, if you do this, then we'll give you some money. Like I said, that was that was sort of epiphanal for me to hear the history of wages.
Yeah.
And so I really truly believe that people do have a thing. I think if you talk to people in their 50s or the 40s or whatever, people that have gone on to earn a wage, and they say, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a ballerina. I wanted to be an astrophysicist.
Yeah.
And maybe an argument can be made that an astrophysicist makes a wage, but he sort of does more than that. You know what I mean? Because he's specialized, and it's sort of artistic. If you talk to a guy, or if you watch a guy like Neil deGrasse Tyson, there's passion there. The guy that digs the ditch, he's not really talking about that last ditch he dug.
No.
But Neil deGrasse Tyson can't get enough of the universe.
Yeah.
And so I think that maybe that's the dividing line and the distinction is those things that drive us and compel us and move us forward, and that we go to bed thinking about and we wake up in the morning, thinking about. To me, that's what we're losing, and that's what I think we might have had more of a chance to explore. Certainly, you tell me that in the 70s you could explore it, and you could be comfortable enough to explore it and to be it, not just explore it, but be it. People say, well, what do you do? Well, I'm a musician. And you were pretty proud of that, because not only did you get donated, but you were proud of the fact that you used your ability for some good, that you built community with it. And sure, every once in a while there was a fight, or somebody got hurt.
But the personal joy that we get from that too, that we've gotten all along from that too. I didn't feel like high and mighty or more than anybody, other musicians or patrons of the clubs. But gosh, you would go there and you would be in just a joy, like an overwhelming, joyous sort of feeling, and then you're playing and other people are like, just going into like almost trances, they're dancing to this stuff and they're the beat, and it's all very hypnotic, and all that. But there's just this kind of thing that happened, and it's not as prevalent, unfortunately,
And you were doing something vital. I went through a phase.
It was vital.
Right.
Yeah.
I went through a phase not that long ago. Well, maybe for years, and I've stopped thinking this way, but, I thought, is it really, my dad was an air traffic controller, there's an achievement. There are doctors and lawyers. There are people out there, digging a ditch and working for the city or whatever. And what do? I hit things. They're tunable things.
Yeah.
Maybe not, you can't create melody, but that's all I do is I hit these things. And I thought, what is that worth? And just lately, in the last couple of years, I think it's worth a lot, because I think it's something that is intuitive within all of us, and something tribal and something necessary that people need. People need to move, and they need to dance, and they need to, they need to see creativity so that they themselves can be creative.
Yeah.
And all of those things work one off the other.
Yeah.
To create a vital society, instead of just somebody that goes to work for somebody else. And maybe he can say, well, I got a nice house though, and I got kids,
Yeah.
But that thing that he does, that he's so passionate about, he works all day just to spend 2 hours doing that. And I think it should be reversed.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of time taken up to be a part of the temporal world, as in making a wage and putting food in the fridge. You know, yeah, it should be reversed. You know, you're spending X amount of decades, you know, at a career or a job, and you know, it's 8 hours a day, and you get, you know, 2, 3, 4 weeks off a year. You know, I mean,
Right.
Unless you really dig what you're doing, and there's a lot of people that do and a lot of people that don't. You know, it's just to be part of, like I said, the temporal world. But if it was reversed, so they you know, you're working 8, 10 hours a day, and then you can take all that you make and enjoy 2 hours of the day, you know, instead of like you said, vice versa, right?
Right.
You know, work 2 hours, you know, have 8 or 10 hours of joy, you know.
You know, my dad, I know your dad passed away. My dad died about 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I never heard my dad say, "I'm so glad I was an air traffic controller." My
Mm-hmm.
dad, when he died, said, "I wish I would have been in the PGA.
Mm.
Why didn't I have the balls to go after what I really wanted?" And, you know, we can
Yeah.
say, well, there's an isolated case for you. I don't think so. I don't think a lot of his friends that worked with him and around him were thinking, "God damn, you know, I'm so good at air traffic control." They were proud of what they did. They provided a service, absolutely. But I think there was something within a lot of those guys. Because my dad was not necessarily an artistic, you know, at least something that you could quantify or qualify from looking at his
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
He might not have necessarily been artistic, but then come to the end of his life, and he was. There was some passion that fueled him and that he regretted.
Well, you have to muster up a lot of courage to do that, though.
Right.
You know, to follow a passion where there's not a wage attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if you,
Scary.
I mean, it's not, you know, I mean, if you so happen to be married with kids, that's even like way more courageous. And you know, you talk to people about life. You know, what's the most important thing in life? It's not music. It's my family. It's people, right? So you know, somebody that's you know, I mean, if you're single, then you're more apt to maybe, you know, want to and be able to, and you can muster up the courage easier to kind of follow a passion in PGA or
Less responsibility.
You know, yeah, but once you've got you know, kids in your life, I mean, you sacrifice, right? And I'm not sure, you know, if you know, if he was a younger man and he just couldn't muster it up. Yeah, when I was a younger guy, I didn't have kids and I wasn't married and all that.
I think what drove my dad was the fact that he was poor. He was poor growing up.
Yeah.
And for him, his life became about war, about warring against ever allowing himself to be looked at by his community as lesser than, and his family lesser than. He was going to defeat that.
Yeah.
And then when he got to the end of his life, he thought, what a stupid, you know, thing to go after.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he left with, you know, with this thing that he felt he could have done that would have sufficed.
But then you have to appreciate the positives. And like I said, you know, PGA and all that, that's fine. But people, you know, your kids, you walked away with having people in your life, you know. I mean, that's typically the number one thing, your family.
Absolutely.
You know.
Jerry, I asked Jerry, you know, because his dad passed on not that long ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, I suppose you're right, absolutely. But I think if you have that, then you look at what is next.
Yeah.
And I asked Jerry, you know, I said, or maybe he told me or whatever, he said, well, you know, like, what was your dad's, you know, what did you guys talk about? You know, like, I don't know how the conversation was formulated, but, you know, he said, me and my dad were talking, and, you know, I said, Dad, is there anything you regret? Something like that. And his dad looked at him and he said, yeah, I should have driven nicer cars. You know? And so...
That's great.
Because he knew he had his family, he didn't want or need for that.
Yeah.
And you're right, that is the fundamental, most basic thing that we probably die.
So you can't sort of quote unquote crucify yourself on, geez, I wish I would have, yeah, you can do that, but then again, what's your biggest joy in life, and I don't know if it's everybody, but I know my family, man, I miss my mom and dad more than anything, period. If my kids, if I lost a child, I think I'd probably be suicidal first of all, but I mean, that would be, if I lost a hand, I couldn't play guitar anymore, God knows it'd be devastating. God knows it would. But if I lost a child, so
that's something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so for example, like I could be taking my last breath. I have the last breath theory, right? If you're going to make a decision, what would you say? Not at this point, but what would you say about that decision? Good, bad? Would you make it or not? If you're taking your last breath, right? So you think of it that way. So last breath, sometimes I think to myself, when I was a young guy, I was free and easy and I was becoming a pretty good player. Why don't I get on the bus or the plane and go to LA and live on the streets and try, to do that? I didn't have the courage to, I guess, So that's sort of like within a thing within my thing,
Right.
It's not like I wanted to be an astrophysicist or do the PGA, but within my realm of my passion, why don't I take a bigger chance?
Right.
Right?
Well, and I know I hear you. That's why I went to London, and I did that at 51. I went to London, and I lived not on the street, but on a street. And not in anything. I lived with 6 Muslim guys for 3 months, and I didn't know, what I mean, like what they thought of me. They knew I was westernized and the infidel. I didn't know how far that was going to go. Until I realized most of these guys were snorting coke and they couldn't have given a shit about being a Muslim, except for Ramadan. And I asked one guy, I said, like, what do you, it's Ramadan, and he's like, oh yes, I said, you want to smoke it? Oh yeah. And then the day after Ramadan, I'm in the kitchen, a kitchen about the size of this table, and he pulls out this plate, and he's like, huh? And I'm like, what? And I look down, and there's like 3 lines of coke on this plate. And I'm like, wow, Ramadan ends pretty quick, doesn't it? When it's over, it's over. It's really over. It's time for party. And I said, no, I'm good, but thanks for the offer, And there again, that's just a misnomer too, because I don't think any one of these guys wanted to cut my head off.
No.
Yeah, and they were, serious Muslim dudes. I think that's another thing we're fed a line about. Look, we could go on and on. Before you take that off, I just want to turn to the people and say thanks again for tuning in. If I can say I appreciate you guys, I mean it. I appreciate watching this. And I would love to know your comments. Comment on YouTube, Facebook. Let me know what you think of this conversation, because everybody's got an opinion. Like they say, opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. So I would love to know what you think of this, and if your comments in some respects are invaluable, because this is about community. It's about all of us. It's not about just me, and it's not about Brent. I want to appreciate a guy like that, and I want to tell him so. But I know he doesn't think, and for him to think that this were just all about him, it's not. It's about us. It's about our community, and it's about keeping that community solid and seeing that community progress, and taking a place like National Music Center and making that our own, whether it's nationally or just the fact that we all participate. I think it's important, because I don't think we can't allow music to be lost, and even though it's too big and it never will be, we can certainly hurt it and damage it, and I don't want to do that. Thank you, people, for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.